Welcome back, Marist Sports fans, to another MBC Sports podcast. I'm Andrew Sellover.
And I'm Connell Scruggs.
Today we will be talking about Marist Sports, and then we'll move on to the GHSA football playoffs and preview Marist's upcoming football matchup against Mary Persons. So as we start off with the general Marist Sports, the swim and dive team traveled up to McCallie and Chattanooga this weekend, and the swimmers had some great races, and a few boy and girl divers placed in the top 10 respectively.
As for boys basketball, they've come back from an opening loss to Pace with a close 63-58 win over Landmark Christian and a 58-39 win against Northview. So a couple good games coming off a loss.
And the girls basketball team also played Landmark Christian this past week and defeated them 57-40. They will travel to the Woodstock Holiday Tournament this week in Woodstock for a great matchup over 3 days. As we move on to the GHSA football rankings, you'll see that Colquitt County remains in the number 1 spot after they defeated McEachern 49-29 last week, and they'll move on to take on North Gwinnett at home in the 7A state football playoffs.
Lee County beat Effingham 54-0 in a blowout win, and they're going to host Lee County in the Elite A matchup.
As we move on down to Warner Robins, they beat Ware County 35-0, and they'll host Clark Central this week.
As for Grayson, they defeated Norcross 37-17, and they're going to take on Lowndes, who's only 1 spot below them, so that's going to be a huge game in this round of the playoffs.
That's right. Lowndes is another good team, and they come in at 5 this week. Both those teams coming off wins in the second round and taking each other on, and I believe it is at Lowndes this week. And so Grayson is coming off a win, as you said, and Lowndes is coming off a shutout win over Westlake 24-0.
And at the 6th spot, we have Archer, who took down Parkview in an upset 36-29. That was a huge win for Archer. And 1 spot below them, Parkview still ranked at number 7. And they're going to host Tift County.
That's right. Archer, they had to travel into a really raucous environment at Parkview, and they took down the Parkview 36-29. It was a close game. Archer went down the field with about 2 minutes left and scored, and Parkview was unable to mount a game-tying drive. As you move down to 7, Parkview, as you said, lost to Archer. And then number 8, North Gwinnett, defeated West Forsyth 41-7 last week, and they'll face Colquitt County away. They'll be traveling to a tough environment to face the number 1 team in Georgia, Colquitt County.
And at the number 9 spot, we have Hillgrove, who defeated a fantastic Walton team by 23-20. And they're going to take on Milton in the next round. That's a great game and a great win for Hillgrove. Number 10, we have Blessed Trinity. They're in the 4A. We'll discuss them later. And same with Cartersville, who's also in 4A.
As we move down to number 12, it's Rome, who defeated Cedar Shoals 35-3 last week, and they will travel to Dutchtown. And that will be Georgia Public Broadcasting's Game of the Week, so that one will be on public television. That is a great matchup between Rome and Dutchtown. As we move to 13, Tift County, the at-large team, they're having to play all on the road this postseason, and they've currently won back-to-back games on the road, defeating East Coweta after the big win 2 weeks ago at Roswell, and they'll move on to face Archer this week, as you said, at Archer. They defeated East Coweta 24-17, and Archer's coming off a big-time win against Parkview, so that one, 2 teams coming on win streaks, coming in on highs. One of them will go down, though, this week.
And 1 spot below them, we have Mary Persons, who's in 4A. We'll discuss them later. They're Marist's matchup this week, and we'll talk about them in the preview. Milton, they defeated Mill Creek 24-3, and they're going to face Hillgrove away.
Yeah, as you move down to 16, it's McEachern, who's actually out of the playoffs now, as they fell to Colquitt County 49-29. It was a good offensive performance, putting up 29 points on the number 1 team in GHSA, but they did fall, and their defense was unable to stop that high-powered Colquitt County offense. As we move down to 17, Connell, it's Cedar Grove. They beat North Hall 49-3, or 49-39. Sorry, and they'll actually have to hit the road to face Benedictine this week, a very talented Benedictine squad.
And at number 18, we have Walton, who fell, as we discussed earlier, to Hillgrove 23-20, only by 3 on the road. They were a very talented team, played great throughout the season, and just happened to fall to a great Hillgrove team.
And as you move down to 19, it's Buford Wolves as they defeated Kell 44-11 in the 5A playoff second round, and they'll host Bainbridge in the quarterfinals of the 5A playoffs.
And rounding off your top 20, we have Dutchtown, who defeated Griffin 28-7. They're going to host Rome in GPB's Game of the Week, as we discussed earlier.
So now as we move into the 4A rankings, you'll notice a few of these teams are out of the playoffs, as were a few of the teams in the GHSA All Classifications rankings. Those teams being St. Pius X, who fell to Marist last week, and North Oconee. But as we start out at number 1, it is Blessed Trinity again this week. They're coming off a great win against North Oconee, 35-10. They'll actually have to hit the road this week, though, and they'll face Eastside in a battle of two top 10 ranked in 4A teams in the quarterfinals. Connell, all 8 teams are in the top 10. All 8 quarterfinal teams for 4A are in the top 10.
Some great matchups coming up. At number 2, we have Cartersville, who defeated Richland 41-7 in a dominant win, and they're going to head to Baldwin, who defeated Columbus 21-0. So a great Baldwin team. It's going to be interesting to see how that one turns out.
Yeah, as you move down, number 3 is Mary Persons, who Marist will be hitting the road this week to face. They defeated Woodward Academy 65-21. You heard me right, 65-21. Very high-powered offense, which we will talk about a little later.
At number 4, we have Troup County, who defeated Pickens 53-14, and they're going to travel to Cairo. They were actually number 2 seed only because they lost to Cartersville in the last week of the season. Played fantastic football basically all year, so that should be a good game for them.
That's right, and as you said, they defeated an undefeated Pickens team 53-14, so showing that they should be they're the quality of a number 1 seed. As you move down, Marist is moved up a spot. They've jumped St. Pius. Marist in at the 5 spot this week, following that huge 24-8 win over St. Pius X last week at St. Pius. It was a great performance by both the offense and the defense for Marist, which we will talk about in a few moments.
And at number 6, we have the St. Pius X Golden Lions, who lost to Marist 24-8, as we discussed. They're still in the top 10 because they're still considered a very good team, very physical, played well all season. Only one loss in the regular season. That was the first week against BT, so they're still considered a top 10 team, even though they lost.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate that they had to face Marist in the second round, only because Marist came in at a 2 seed, because Marist was obviously in the Blessed Trinity region. So it's really unfortunate that for St. Pius that they had to face such a talented Marist team the second rounds of the state playoffs, and they had to bow out in the second round, even though they probably had the talent to be a quarterfinal, potentially semifinal team.
And one spot down, we have Cairo, the Cairo Syrup Makers. They defeated Thompson 38-14, and they're going to host a tough Troup County team, so that's going to be a great game.
Yeah, that's right. It's number 7 Cairo against the 4th-ranked Troup County. Troup County will have to go to Cairo because Cairo is a 1 seed. North Oconee at the 8th spot, they lost to Blessed Trinity in a hard-fought game, 35-10. Unfortunate way to end their season. As we move down to number 9, it's undefeated Eastside, who defeated Burke County in a really close one. That was probably the best second-round matchup in 4A. It was a 42-35 win for Burke County, and they'll host, 42-35 win for Eastside, and they'll host Blessed Trinity this week.
And running off here for a top 10, we have Baldwin, who defeated Columbus at home 21-0, and they're going to host Cartersville. They've had a couple of dominant wins during this playoff. They beat Perry 39-22, and then Columbus, as we mentioned earlier, 21-0. So a couple commanding wins for them. They're going to come up against a tough Cartersville team who has been undefeated this entire season. So this should be a very interesting game.
That's right, and now we'll move into a preview for Marist upcoming game against Mary Persons. And we'll look back at the Marist win first over St. Pius and some of the stats coming off of that one.
Yes, Marist defense had another fantastic game as they've been playing fantastic basically all season. They allowed 53 yards rushing to a triple option team and 134 yards passing to St. Pius last week.
Yeah, and you mentioned that 134 yards passing to St. Pius, and most of that came on the one touchdown play for St. Pius. I believe it was about an 80-yard touchdown play
Yep.
to
That's right.
the St. Pius wide receiver. So Marist only gave up about 50 passing yards besides that one play. But St. Pius really caught the Marist defense by surprise with that pass, which really can't happen this week because it's a high-powered Mary Persons offense that throws the ball a lot.
Yeah, and on the offensive side of the ball for Marist, they had a pretty average outing, 21 passing yards on 3 for 7 passing, and 247 rushing yards, which is really good because they had 5.8 yards per carry for a total of 268 yards. Scored 24 points, pretty good performance overall.
Yeah, and it was a very similar performance by both the offense and the defense to a matchup against Flowery Branch a few weeks ago. It was a good Flowery Branch team, and the Marist offense really got the run game going, as they did against St. Pius as well, and they really just dominated the offensive and defensive lines, and the defense also took over, gave the offense good field position in that game, which besides the one deep ball and the safety is about what happened in this St. Pius game as well.
Yeah, and quarterback Connor Skilsey had a pretty good game, 154 yards on 24 carries. So if you include his two big runs, a 79-yard touchdown run and a 42-yard touchdown run, if you include those two runs, he had 6.4 yards per carry. But without those, it's pretty concerning, 1.5 yards per carry without those runs. So, you can take it for what it is. A pretty good run, a pretty good running game for him. Able to explode on the outside, run down the sideline for a couple of big touchdown runs that we needed in the time of the game.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, his two long runs, it seemed like whenever he tried to keep it and run up the middle, he wasn't really getting anything. The linebackers were really spying on him. But whenever he was able to bounce it outside, he has some great speed on the outside. He was running away from the St. Pius defenders on those two touchdowns. So if he can try and bounce it outside and get a few good blocks, he could have another explosive game against Mary Persons, which we mentioned it's not the best defense, but their offense is really explosive. So the Marist offense could have another pretty good game like they had against St. Pius. It's going to come down to what the defense can do stopping the Mary Persons offense, I think.
Yeah, and Marist is going to have to do everything they need to do to win this game because last game against Pius, they executed everything that they needed to get points. I mentioned a couple keys before. They needed to get Kyle Hamilton involved. They sure did that. 72 yards on 10 carries, most of them from the Wildcat, and a 17-yard touchdown for him. And they needed to stop the run. They did both of those things and were able to be successful because of that.
Yeah, but the one concerning thing I thought against St. Pius was the pass defense. I know they had that one deep ball where the safeties were pinching in trying to stop the run, and they threw it right over the safety's head. And that was concerning because Mary Persons is a very high-powered offense. They like to throw the ball around, so the Marist defense is going to have to watch out for that. Also, on the outside, it was single coverage, and the cornerbacks for Marist were giving the St. Pius wide receivers 5-10 yards of space at the line of scrimmage. So all St. Pius's quarterback had to do was throw it out there, and they were getting 8, 10, 15 yards per pass on the outside. And if Marist does that against Mary Persons, it's a very talented quarterback for Mary Persons who can really throw the ball accurately. and they might exploit that if Marist isn't up on the line of scrimmage shutting down the short
Yeah,
passes.
Marist is going to have a fantastic defensive game. As you mentioned, quarterback for Mary Persons, JT Hartaj. He's a senior. He throws for about 223 passing yards per game, .701 70% completion percentage, and about 20 yards per completion. So he's playing absolutely fantastic this season, putting up career numbers. They're going to have to play really strongly to win this game.
That's right. And for the Marist defense against St. Pius, some more numbers. It was an 8 for 14 completion percentage for Connor Egan, which is a little concerning, as I talked about, because they were really letting him have any of the short passes he wants. And with the explosive wide receivers Mary Persons have, that could be a dangerous asset that Mary Persons could exploit. Also, the one interception for Josh Moore on the defense, and we had 3 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. So towards the end of the game, the Marist defensive line really wore down that St. Pius O-line, and look for them to do some more of the same against Mary Persons. The offensive and defensive lines both really dominated against St. Pius, and they'll need to do the same.
Yep, they are, because as we mentioned, this potent Mary Persons offense, 449 total yards per game on the season. Linebackers are going to have to play well, especially up the middle, because Mary Persons is running for about 230 yards per game, 7.1 yards per carry, which is absolutely crazy. 48 rushing touchdowns on the year, so that's about 4 per game. So we're really going to have one of our trademark defensive performances against Mary Persons to succeed.
Yeah, Marist is really going to have to, on offense, just keep the ball away from the Mary Persons offense. They're just going to have to run the ball, run the clock out, try and keep that Mary Persons offense on the sideline. And if Marist can win that time of possession battle, win the maybe field position battle, that could be really key in this game. Some more offensive numbers for Mary Persons against Woodward. It was even more scary. They put up even better numbers against Woodward than they have been doing all season. 250 yards passing, 275 yards running. That's just unheard of numbers at the high school level.
Yep, and putting up 62 points on the board. And on the rushing side, 11 yards per carry. So they're absolutely abusing defenses along the way. But you mentioned time of possession is going to be extremely important, because although Mary Persons put up 62 points on the board, they had 25 less points, 25 less plays than Woodward had. So they're not possessing the ball very often, which just shows how efficient they are. But it shows they're pretty vulnerable to being on defense quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a really fast tempoed, fast striking offense. Deep ball, real threat for Mary Persons. So if the Marist defense can shut down the long plays, just hold Mary Persons within check, and they just got to give the Marist offense a chance in this game. If Marist defense can hold Mary Persons to maybe 20, 25 points in this game, it's not going to be the same level defense as you saw against St. Pius.
Yep.
That St. Pius defense is really, really good. They stopped the run really well, and they were really shutting down the run until Marist put Kyle Hamilton into the Wildcat. This Mary Persons defense, they'll give up points. It's just the Marist offense has got to find what the defense gives them, and if they can find that, they got to take advantage.
Yep, and that's going to do it for this week's preview of Mary Persons versus Marist football. That game is going to be at 7:30, I believe.
Yeah, that'll be 7:30
yes.
this Friday. Day after Thanksgiving, a lot of you will be out of town. I know Marist Broadcasting Club MBC will have live coverage of that on the NFHS network, so be sure to stay tuned. Check our Twitter if you need any updates, but be sure to tune into that broadcast. Check out this quarterfinal matchup between Marist and Mary Persons, which is sure to be a good one.
Yes, it will. So for MBC, I'm Connell Scruggs.
And I'm Andrew Sellover. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.